All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something truly wild, something that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. The United States has just captured the sitting president of another country.
So get this. On January 3rd, 2026, U.S. military forces pull off this incredible overnight raid in Caracas, Venezuela. Their target? None other than President Nicolás Maduro himself. And they got him. Mission successful. And how do we know this for sure? Well, the confirmation came straight from the top, the White House. President Trump himself announced the capture. And just like that, everything we thought we knew about U.S. foreign policy in Latin America, it's been completely turned on its head.
Okay, so the big question is, how on earth did we get here, and what happens now? Here's how we're going to break it all down for you. First, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the raid itself. Then, we'll rewind and look at the long road that led to this moment. After that, we'll dig into both sides of the story, figure out what this all means for Americans, for us, and finally, we'll peer into the very uncertain future that Venezuela is now facing.
All right, Section 1. Let's start with the raid. How exactly did this all go down? Let's dive into the details of this pretty audacious overnight operation. So, from what we can piece together, the scene in Caracas was pure chaos. Imagine this. A citywide blackout just plunges the entire capital into darkness. Then airstrikes start hitting key military bases. People are seeing these elite U.S. Special Ops helicopters. We're talking Chinooks and Black Hawks flying over the city. It must have been terrifying. And then the confirmation. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodríguez comes out and not only confirms the capture, but demands proof of life. And you gotta understand, this is a huge deal. This is the first time the U.S. has directly intervened to remove a leader in Latin America since all the way back in 1989 with Panama.
Okay, so an operation this big, this consequential, it doesn't just happen overnight. This thing has roots, and they go deep, stretching back for more than 20 years. This timeline really tells the story of how the pressure just kept ratcheting up, step by step. You can trace it all the way back to 2002 with alleged U.S. involvement in a coup against Hugo Chavez. Then jump to 2015, when the Obama administration labels Venezuela an extraordinary threat, which, opens the door for all sorts of sanctions. Things get really heated in 2019 when the U.S. officially recognizes Juan Guaido as the interim president. A year later, bam, the U.S. indicts Maduro on narcoterrorism charges. And then the final pieces fall into place. In late 2025, Operation Southern Spear kicks off, basically strikes on what they call drug boats. And that, right there, set the stage for this final dramatic raid. And all of this brings us right to the heart of the debate, right? You've got two completely different stories here. On one side, you have the U.S. justification for what they did. On the other, well, you have international law. Let's unpack that. Okay, so the entire legal argument from the U.S. really hangs on this one specific term, narcoterrorism. It's not just a buzzword. It's the legal basis for everything. The U.S. argues that Maduro wasn't just a president. He was the head of a massive drug trafficking organization using the entire government to pump drugs into the U.S.
And this is where things get really interesting, because the two sides are just worlds apart. The U.S. is saying, hey, this isn't an act of war. This is a police action. We're taking down a criminal kingpin. But then you have a whole bunch of international law experts looking at this and saying, whoa, not so fast. They argue it's a totally illegal use of force because there was no UN mandate, it wasn't self-defense, and it doesn't meet any of the standards for, a so-called pro-democracy intervention. But wait, there's actually a third side to this story, coming from inside Venezuela itself. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has a completely different take. She's basically saying Venezuela was already invaded by Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and a bunch of drug cartels. So in her view, the U.S. action isn't an invasion, it's more like a response to an invasion that already happened. All right, so let's bring this all back home. Why should you, an American, care about the capture of a president thousands of miles away? What does it actually mean for your life, for your wallet? Well, the answer, as it so often does, can be summed up in one word: oil. Just look at that number, 303 billion barrels. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. Venezuela is literally sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet. That's more than Saudi Arabia. We're talking about 20%, 1/5 of all the oil in the world. But here's the crazy part, the big paradox. They have all this oil, right? But their ability to actually get it out of the ground has completely collapsed. I mean, look at this chart.
Back in the 70s, they were pumping out 3.5 million barrels a day. By last year, it was barely over 1 million. Why? A toxic mix of mismanagement, corruption, and, of course, sanctions. And that is the massive prize that's now up for grabs.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. How does this affect us? Well, in the short term, all this uncertainty could easily mean you're paying more at the pump. And it's not just gas. Shipping costs for everything from your groceries to your Amazon packages could go up. Now, on the flip side, higher gas prices could be a little boost for American ethanol producers. Looking further down the road, if this creates a huge power vacuum and things get unstable, you could see more migration pressure on the southern border. But the real game changer, the big one, it's the possibility of U.S. oil companies swooping in, investing billions to rebuild that shattered oil industry. And if that happens, it could totally reshape the global energy map for the next generation.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important question. With Maduro out of the picture, what happens now? What does the future hold for Venezuela? The honest answer is, nobody really knows. Well, the Trump administration has made its plan pretty clear, and it's bold, to say the least. The official line is, the United States will run Venezuela until a safe transition occurs. Now, what that actually means on the ground, or what legal authority they have to do it, that's all completely up in the air. We are entering a brand new, uncharted chapter of American involvement here. And so we're left with this massive central question. Decades from now, how will history see this moment? Will it be the liberation of a nation from a brutal dictator? Or will it be the event that destabilized an entire region, creating a power vacuum that leads to years of conflict? One thing is for sure, the price of intervention is always incredibly high. And for Venezuela, and for the world, the final bill is just starting to be calculated.